This video is sponsored by PLAUD. I did not think it was possible, but the relationship between the European Union and Hungary has gotten even worse. And that is because of a story last week, which is quite honestly incredible. The foreign minister of Hungary attended Council of the EU meetings and in his lunch break reported back to Russia, to Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister from Russia, about what happened in the European Union, of what they basically talked about. Just imagine that for a minute. Vadaful, the foreign minister of Germany, could be in the meeting saying, oh, in the next quarter we're going to deliver these weapons to Ukraine, or we're going to do this to help Ukraine. And then an hour later, the foreign minister of Hungary calls Mr. Lavrov and tells him all of the European Union plans. How crazy is that? And to make all of this even worse, the journalist in Hungary who uncovered this entire story is now being charged by the Hungarian government for spying for, wait for it, Ukraine. I mean, I'm really not making this up. It's a pretty crazy story. And on top of all that, Hungary is also blocking 90 billion euros of loans to Ukraine and the 20th sanctions package. I mean, it goes without saying that European countries are growing very tired of Viktor Orbán in Hungary. And this is not just because he's blocking everything. Hungary is also not really in line anymore with our values here in the European Union. Just have a look here at the Rule of Law Index, where Hungary ranks lowest in the European Union when it comes to rule of law. This means an independent judiciary and, of course, corruption, which is really appalling. I mean, we as a channel even talked to Markizé, the main opponent of Orban 4 years ago, and he uncovered crazy corruption stories that we will show you in a video coming next week. But this could all change in 2 weeks, because Hungary is heading to the polls, and TISA, led by Péter Magyar, is well ahead of Orban, 15%, which is massive. However, I do need to say here that having talked to lots of Hungarians, we do need to take these polls with a massive grain of salt, because the odds really are stacked in favor for Viktor Orbán. The way the whole election works, the way votes are distributed, the propaganda machine, etc. So a lot could still change here. Therefore, the European Union really does need to be ready just in case Orban wins again. And there are a lot of options on the table, actually, of what the EU could do to get around Viktor Orbán's veto. And we've made a cool pyramid, or it's more of a list, of 5 measures that the EU could take from the least severe all the way to the most severe, level 5. And we'll go through these one by one. But before we do that, a quick shout out to our sponsor. To make a video like this, I usually have multiple calls, background chats, and pages of research and notes. Because when you're covering EU trade policy or geopolitics, missing one nuance can distort the entire explanation. And it often takes me hours rewatching recordings or digging through notes to double check one small detail. And that's why I really like PLAUD. It records conversations, turns them into clean transcripts with speaker labels, so I know who said what, and then organizes everything into summaries and action points. On my computer, it even reminds me to start recording when a meeting begins. One click and it's done. You might ask, why not just use a phone? For me, PLAUD works differently. It's a dedicated device that records 20 to 30 hours straight with built-in noise reduction, and it doesn't get interrupted by calls or notifications. But what really makes the difference is what happens after. With Ask PLAUD, I can simply ask, what were the key arguments from my discussion on the EU-India trade deal last week? And it finds the exact part in seconds. It also has analysis tools that help pick up on power dynamics and what people actually want. And at that point, it's basically an awesome recall assistant that saves hours of work. PLAUD also meets high international data protection standards, and I can use it professionally with confidence. So, whether you're a journalist, researcher, analyst, or anyone working with complex information, this isn't just about recording. It's about thinking more clearly. You can try PLAUD with 3 months of Pro for free using my link below. If one missed detail costs time, accuracy, or credibility, this is genuinely worth looking at. So, back to the video and to our lovely pyramid of what we can do against Orban if he wins the election again in 1.5 weeks' time. And the first level here is all about financial pressure, something that we've been doing for years. This basically means that the EU, who uses something called cohesion funds, which funnels money into the poorer Eastern normally countries in the European Union get frozen, which has happened. I think at the moment there's around 20 billion euros that are on their way to Hungary but are currently frozen. But the big problem here is that these measures simply have not worked in the past. In fact, they might have actually emboldened Orban because he uses his veto to try and release this money. And we saw a clear example of this more than 2 years ago when the European Commission released 10 billion euros of frozen Hungarian funds literally 1 day before there was a vote on accession or starting the accession negotiations with Ukraine. That really does look like a backroom political deal between the Commission and Orban, which is kind of not what the EU is about. And that brings us to our second measure, which is about a multi-speed EU, or in more official EU language, enhanced cooperation for member states that want to do more together. And the way this works is that at least 9 EU member states have to agree upon something and then get approval of all of the other member states in order to move forward. And we've seen a very clear example of this in December last year, where 24 member states agreed on 90 billion euros of loans going from the EU to Ukraine. And back then, the other 3 countries, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Hungary, who do not have to contribute or pay interest, agreed, right? They said, okay, move forward. And then only literally 1 month ago, Hungary withdrew their support, meaning now that 90 billion is frozen to go to Ukraine, even though Hungary is not even paying, which is, insane and really shows the limits of using enhanced cooperation. And that brings us to voting in the European Union itself. Is that something we can reform? And the answer is yes, it is. And there's 3 different things we can do. The first one is mainly more of a workaround, which we saw in action only a couple of years ago. And this was quite creative. So the way it worked is there was an important vote, again, about Ukraine. And right before the vote, with all the European leaders, Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany back then, asked Orban to leave the room for a couple of minutes. And while Orban was gone, the room voted. And because Hungary wasn't there, the ruling passed with 27 votes in favor and 1 abstention. So that is definitely a model we could try to use in the future. The second option is a bit more robust though, and this would be something called the Passerelle clause. And what would happen here is that the European Union would agree that foreign policy, for example, would no longer be decided by unanimity, but by qualified majority voting, which of course would be great. But in order to get there, you need unanimity, where all the countries agree to make this change for foreign policy. Do you see Orban agreeing to that? Because I definitely don't. So that option becomes difficult. Which brings us to the next option, which is very simple: EU reform. Reform the EU so that in certain areas, unanimity is no longer required, but qualified majority is. But this is a super long process with months of deliberations. Years of talks. And at the end, you also need unanimity to get all of this through. Again, something that obviously certain leaders are just not interested in. So yeah, very difficult to change the way the EU votes, which brings us to the fourth option. Why don't we just suspend the voting rights of Hungary? And we can do that. Article 7 allows exactly this, that one country's voting rights can be suspended. But again, here we run into new problems. While a lot of countries would be very much in favor to remove Hungarian voting rights, not all. There's Slovakia, who definitely would not be in favor because Fico and Orban are friends, I would say. And then, of course, there's Czech Republic too, who are not exactly friends with Orban, but are unlikely to approve, or at least Babiš is unlikely to approve such a ruling. Meaning that this is very, very unlikely to pass unless we can somehow put a lot of pressure on all of the countries to vote in favor. And then there's option 5. And option 5 is all about kicking Hungary out of the EU. Sounds very simple, practically though, very difficult. Mainly because there's simply no article, no EU rule that allows the EU to do this. The only thing that we have is Article 50, which is voluntary withdrawal, which is what the UK used during Brexit. And obviously Hungary has no interest in doing this. Hungary actually gets a lot out of the EU, and a lot of funds too, so why would Orban ever want to leave it? There are, of course, some creative ways that you could try to kick Orban out using Article 50, and the one that amused me the most was, imagine if all 26 other countries voluntarily withdrew from the EU, basically left the EU, and then instantly when they leave, sign up to it again with the same institutions, the same way of working, etc. But of course, this time without Hungary. But yeah, this is extremely risky and not really viable and a bit too complex. So I really don't see this happening. So yeah, there you have it. Here is our pyramid with the 5 measures the European Union could take against Hungary if Orban were to win again. This is what I think. I really think the EU needs to be prepared because I am not convinced, as sad as it is, that Orban will really lose in 1.5 weeks' time. He's defied the polls quite a few times already, and yeah, I could see him going into a 5th term. And if that is the case, we have to do something. I think obviously level 1 we should do. Financial pressure is great. But I think we should also really consider option 4. Removing Hungary's voting rights. I know it's difficult because you need 26 other countries to agree, but I think we could pressure Slovakia and Czech Republic to actually agree. For example, with financial carrots that we could potentially put forward, or being a little more lax in certain reporting requirements or whatever, right? There's a lot on the table that we can use to try and push these countries more towards our orbit and help us vote against Hungary and remove their voting rights. I think this is critical. And of course, in the long term, we have to go for option 3, or tier 3 in our pyramid, where we reform the European Union, reforming it so that qualified majority voting applies to foreign policy. Because then you will not have this scenario anymore where one country, a country of less than 10 million people, can hold the entire continent at ransom. 450 million people in our continent and 10 million can basically blackmail all of us. That, my friends, is not democratic, and we have to do something against it. So yeah, option 3 should be our long-term plan. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to all of our presidents that support the channel. See you in the next video.